a national movement called the 4 Mile March.
4 Mile March.
4 miles. The 4 Mile March held here in San Diego to a demonstration that brought out hundreds in Springfield, Missouri, to this emotional walk over the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Alabama.
This was the first year for the event. It coincided with similar marches across the country.
And right now in City Heights, there is a march that's getting underway, and that's where we find Fox 5's Sharon Chen. Good afternoon, Sharon.
Hey, Erica and Andrew. Yes, this march is just about ready to get underway. You can see these people already starting to gather. Let's go ahead and talk with organizer Catherine Mendonca. And Catherine, how many people are we expecting here today, do you think?
You know, over 100 people RSVP'd on Facebook. It looks like we're getting a pretty good crowd now, and we're still going to go forward in March. The goal of this march is to also raise awareness to not only for the legacy of Martin Luther King, but the epidemic of racial profiling and police brutality, which hasn't been addressed in marches in San Diego so far, especially on Martin Luther King.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Catherine. And we will, of course, be able to talk to a lot of these people and get their thoughts on the march, and we'll have a full report for you at 4 o'clock. That's it for now. We're going to send it back to you.
All right, Sharon Chen in City Heights. We'll see you then. Sharon, thank you.
On this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, local activists are trying to bring awareness to racial profiling and police brutality.
Participants at today's 4 Mile March say they want to honor those injured and lost as a result of police violence. CBS News 8's Shannon Handy joins us live from Valencia Park where the march just ended. Shannon?
Barberly and Carlo, demonstrators mostly marched along Fairmount today before turning onto Market, where I'm standing, and winding up in front of the Malcolm X Library. They tell me today's march is what Martin Luther King Jr. Day is all about.
All right, everyone, let's start going towards the streets. Let's do it.
For 4 miles, they marched.
Hands up! Don't shoot!
And yelled in unison along the way.
Shoot! Toy gun! Don't shoot!
More than 100 people took part in the Martin Luther King Jr. Day event, which started at the City Heights Performance Annex and ended outside the Malcolm X Library.
Blue lives matter! Black lives matter!
It's all part of a national movement called the 4 Mile March, organized by the Coalition Against Police Violence.
It's to bring awareness to America's epidemic of racial profiling and police brutality.
Inspired by the deaths of unarmed black men like Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York, many here say it's hard to believe that years after Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, these types of incidents still occur.
It's sad to me that after all this time, I'm a United States Marine. I feel like I fought for our rights and fought for our freedom, just to come back here and not have those rights and freedoms protected.
Mark Jones claims he has dealt with racial profiling for years.
Of just being stopped for absolute no reason, being made to get out and have my car searched when there was no probable cause.
But then there are those who have not, but were marching nonetheless.
I think that Dr. King would be ashamed of everyone who realizes that things are wrong and doesn't stand up and use their voice to say, hey, something is wrong.
Despite their vocal criticism against law enforcement, officers from the San Diego Police Department provided escorts, all while reminding demonstrators to keep things peaceful and not cause traffic problems like we've seen in the past.
You work with me, I work with you. We allow you to do your thing. We don't interrupt you. We don't get involved with you.
In the end, no major issues were reported during what many say is just the beginning of this movement.
We got to keep fighting. Even though we made some progress, we have a long way to go.
It took demonstrators about an hour and a half to complete the 4 mile walk. Now, police officials tell me the demonstrators were allowed in the southbound lanes as part of their First Amendment rights. Back to you.
Thanks, Shannon. This was the first year for the event. It coincided with similar marches across the country.
Our protesters took to the streets of San Diego to complain of what they call police violence, coupling their demonstration with a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 10 News reporter Steve Fiorina is now live at the Malcolm X Library in Emerald Hills. And Steve, this was very similar to other protests, but a special day of significance with this one.
Steve, many of the protesters called to mind the peaceful protest of Dr. King, saying that's what today is all about. They came down through the city, marching up Market Street here to the library. The rally began at the City Heights Library. Community activists ready to launch a march calling themselves United Against Police Terror San Diego. Modeled after peaceful protests led by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. half a century ago.
We seek to both honor the legacy of Dr. King and to remind the nation that the fight for justice and equality is far from over.
It's a freedom of speech.
San Diego police advised the demonstrators to keep it safe and within the law. And most seemed on the same page.
It's about activist work without doing violence and anything else and stuff like that. And I think it's very important to let young kids know about, the role models that you have out there, like Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, and so on.
Martin Luther King, he marched peacefully. That's the reason we're out here. But he marched for our civil rights. He marched for our voting rights. That's why we're out here. A big cause for today is police brutality and accountability. So that's one of the biggest reasons we're marching today.
Lots of protest signs, black shirts with slogans to make their point.
The San Diego Police Department, like most law enforcement, has become more fixated on using force than using community policing.
They embarked on their march for about 4 miles, more than 100 strong, a police escort providing safe passage on city streets.
Say Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Say Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Arriving at Malcolm X Library for a brief rally to end the protest. And at 7 o'clock, some of the personal thoughts some of the protesters took this very personally today. Live in Emerald Hills, Steve Fiorina attending.
Then hitting the streets in memory of Martin Luther King Jr. as local marchers try to spread his civil rights message.
Fox 5's Sharon Chen is with the group that walked from City Heights all the way to Emerald Hills today. Sharon.
That's right, Jen and Andrew. We are at the Malcolm X Library here in Emerald Hills. This is where the march ended. You can see behind me there's still a few stragglers here. But today they took to the streets to honor a great civil leader, but also bring what they say was a peaceful message to the streets. It's a day to honor a great civil rights leader.
The fight that he had for civil rights, the fight that he had to get our voting rights.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King had his foot in the streets. Martin Luther King had his foot in the churches.
But also on this day to continue King's legacy, it's an opportunity to send a message.
Hands up, don't shoot!
As for this protest, organizers say the goal is peace.
Our goal is to have a peaceful march for everybody.
Because after all, that is what Martin Luther King Jr. was all about.
That was his goal, peaceful demonstration, and you see what it led to. It led to our civil rights, it led to our voting rights.
And organizers estimate that there was probably about 100 to 150 people here during the height of that march. And just like they said, their goal was to keep it peaceful, and they did. That's it for now. We'll send it back to you. Jen?
All right, Sharon, thank you so much.
More than 100 San Diegans hit the streets today to protest police violence. The movement in conjunction with Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The group, calling themselves United Against Police Terror San Diego, had signs, shirts with slogans, and face masks. They marched for about 4 miles through the City Heights area, ending with a rally at the Malcolm X Library in Emerald Hills. Coming up new at 7, some of the protesters share what compelled them to take part in that rally.
Marchers took to the streets of San Diego today, protesting what they call an epidemic of police brutality and also honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. 10 News reporter Steve Fiorina is now live in Emerald Hills with what made this so personal for some. Steve.
Steve, people came here, some calling for action, others seeking awareness of problems, and others saying there should be more recognition of role models like Dr. King. The rally in March struck a chord with people in the inner city.
It's from every color, culture, age, and this is my neighborhood. This is City Heights, and community. They're coming together and making a difference on Martin Luther King Day, which is important.
Planning a peaceful protest as Dr. King did generations ago.
So we're here to reclaim Martin Luther King Day. It's not just about people going out shopping, getting the sales at JCPenney's or Macy's. There's a reason why we're out here.